The Minnesota Timberwolves entered the 1998 NBA offseason full of promise. With budding superstar Kevin Garnett and supporting star Stephon Marbury leading the way, the Wolves were coming off their first winning season in franchise history. Looking to build on their momentum, Minnesota signed former #1 overall pick Joe Smith ahead of the lockout-shortened 1999 season. It seemed as though Smith had sold himself short by agreeing to a small one-year contract with the upstart Wolves. However, the truth was much shadier, and that seemingly team-friendly pact with Smith would end up costing Minnesota dearly. Though the play of fellow 1995 draftees like Garnett and Damon Stoudemire made Golden State's selection of Smith at #1 overall look suspect in retrospect, the 6'10 forward nicknamed the Beast was no slouch. Through his first 3 seasons with the Warriors and 76ers, Smith averaged better than 16 points, 7 rebounds, and a block while suiting up for all but 5 contests. That's why it seems strange, to say the least, when the Timberwolves were able to sign Smith to a one-year contract worth less than $2 million. Even for 1999 standards, that was peanuts for a player like Smith, who had reportedly turned down an $80 million extension from Golden State before the Warriors traded him to Philly. He wasn't the most efficient youngster, but as a productive 23-year-old who could play every front court position, the prospect of pairing him with a young KG brought endless possibilities for Minnesota, or at least it seemed that way. Rather than seeing his impact and efficiency rise in a supporting role beside Garnett, Smith's production slipped in Minnesota, and the Timberwolves disappointed. The team slid back to 500 in a taxing 99 season that saw the Wolves trade Marbury to New Jersey. Still, the Wolves re-signed Smith to another small one-year contract for the 1999-2000 campaign, which saw Smith lose his starting job while averaging a then career-low 9.9 points per game. Given that the team put together a 50-win year while Smith faded from relevance, it was reasonable to envision the Timberwolves moving on from the big man. Instead, Minnesota once again signed Smith to, you guessed it, another one-year deal. Smith wouldn't play for the Wolves on that new contract, however. The jig was finally up. Smith and the Timberwolves might have gotten off scot-free if not for a scandalous agent breakup. When agent Andy Miller left Eric Fleischer's firm, he took Garnett and Smith with him as clients. When Fleischer responded with a lawsuit in 2000, a number of records, documents, and phone calls came to light as part of the legal process. Among the revelations, the Timberwolves front office, led by owner Glenn Taylor and vice president Kevin McHale, had reached an illegal agreement with Smith in '99. The pact would see Smith sign 3 consecutive one-year contracts with Minnesota so that the capped-out Wolves could get his bird rights, at which point the team could go over the cap to re-sign him. All of this was to eventually pave the way for a 7-year, $86 million deal in 2001. In short, when Minnesota originally signed Smith to a 1-year, $1.75 million contract, it was just a cover for an under-the-table deal worth roughly $93 million over 10 years. Now, jumping through such hoops just to acquire a non-star can be damaging enough, but the punishment handed down on the Timberwolves is what really set the franchise back. In addition to suspending Taylor, forcing McHale into an unpaid leave of absence, and fining the team $3.5 million, the equivalent of roughly $6.1 million in 2023, then Commissioner David Stern stripped the Wolves of their next 5 first-round draft picks, though Minnesota's 2003 pick was eventually returned. There are 8 to 10 teams that do this all the time, McHale said after Stern's punishment was finalized. They're just good at it. We're bad, added the Hall of Fame big man turned team executive, who also admitted he hadn't read a contract in 4 or 5 years. Tampering and cap circumvention weren't the only things that the Wolves did worse than everybody else. After selecting Wally Szczerbiak with the 6th pick in the 1999 draft, the Timberwolves' only pick between 2000 and 2004 was Dudi Ebe in 2003. The next 3 picks after Ebe, who played just 19 NBA games, were Kendrick Perkins, Leandro Barbosa, and Josh Howard. Stern also voided Smith's contracts, which stripped him of his bird rights in Minnesota and made him a free agent again. The embattled former star then signed for 1 year and $2.25 million in Detroit, where he would rebuild some of his value before returning to Minnesota on a 6-year, $34 million contract in 2001. The capped-out Timberwolves used the entirety of their salary cap exception to sign Smith that summer, once again staking much of their already mortgaged future on him. Though Smith enjoyed a solid and efficient return year with the Wolves, starting for a 51-win playoff team, his contributions paled in comparison to the damage the franchise's original agreement with him caused. With little, if any, cap flexibility, no emerging young talent, and a dearth of draft capital, the Wolves were never able to surround Garnett with a supporting cast worthy of his greatness. By the time KG's MVP season in 2003-2004 yielded the only playoff series victories and conference finals trip in franchise history, Smith was already gone. 2 years into his 6-year contract, the Wolves traded Smith and Anthony Peeler to Milwaukee for Sam Cassell and Irvin Johnson. Helping the Wolves land Cassell was Smith's greatest contribution to a team that ultimately sacrificed 4 first-rounders and tens of millions of dollars for his services. Over 4 seasons with the Timberwolves, Smith averaged 10.3 points, 6.3 rebounds, 1.1 assists, and 1.1 blocks on 53% true shooting. The Wolves faded further from contention every year after that 2004 playoff run. With his monumental efforts all for naught, Garnett eventually okayed a trade to Boston ahead of the 2007-2008 campaign, fueling the Celtics' 17th championship run in his first season with the club.
Man, I'm so hyped right now. Anything's possible. Anything's possible!
The Wolves have enjoyed just 3 winning seasons and 0 postseason series victories in 16 years since trading KG. Smith would wrap up his career in 2011, having played for 12 teams in 16 years. The former #1 pick, who turned down $80 million just a couple years into his career, wound up making roughly $61.2 million total over more than a decade in the association. It was a lose-lose deal all around. Fans of the modern game are used to allegations of tampering, but such talk has usually been reserved for marquee free agents and superstars like LeBron James and Giannis Antetokounmpo, budding stars like Jalen Brunson, or championship veterans like Kyle Lowry. In addition, most fans today equate tampering to early and/or improper contact with a pending free agent, or perhaps to a team executive speaking too freely about a player on a rival team. We don't necessarily think of it from a cap circumvention standpoint. But long before just getting a summer meeting with LeBron was the motivation, Smith and the Timberwolves set the standard for tampering. The league, in kind, set the standard for punishing the practice. Given that there hasn't been another example of such blatant rule skirting in the nearly quarter century since, it appears Stern's heavy hand worked as intended, dissuading future teams from engaging in such shenanigans. Then again, as McHale himself noted, perhaps teams are just better at doing it and getting away with it than the Timberwolves were.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video and want to see more content like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button.